All right, welcome everyone to the EED webinar number 3. It is March 3rd, and our theme for today is testing resilience. And we've talked a lot about resilience in previous webinars, how to build it, how to anchor it. I haven't talked as much about the concept of testing it, putting it to the test, making sure that it will withstand challenges and resistance that people will meet out there in the world. And the other thing I'll say is, let's say in the coaching world, leadership world, the idea of testing or provoking is not always so popular. But it's something we do all the time in EED, because what we want is that for whatever we're building, we want to make sure it has integrity. We do not want to send somebody out into the world with a false sense of self or a false sense of strength, because that can easily deflate with the first challenge. So testing resilience is actually a really important skill to learn. I wish it were taught more. And I know it does get taught, but then some people have misconceptions that, well, if I provoke or test my client, am I being cruel? Am I being mean? And in the past, I've seen other people be provocative, but it was also a bit reckless and bordering on irresponsible. So what I'm giving you today is a completely safe and healthy way to use provocation, and there's an art to it, and I'm going to walk you right through that. Because what I will say, if you're working with clients as a coach or a leader, or even if you're working with yourself in your own self-development, if you're unwilling to test yourself or test the client, well, the world certainly will test you. The world is not going to treat you like you're fragile. So we might as well do it in the session before sending someone out to action. And that is really what testing resilience is all about. It's a way to prepare for action, to make sure that the action will be sustainable. Okay. Now, in webinars 1 and 2 of this year, we looked at what's the role of resistance in the creative cycle. We looked more in depth at what exactly is the creative cycle. So this one now focuses on, well, how do you apply that resistance to the creative cycle, the way of manifesting things, the way of taking idea into finished product. And what's also very important to remember is no matter who you're working with, whether it's yourself or a client, we are not fragile. And that is a foundation of emergent essence dynamics, is everything is based upon sparking resilience, pulling it out, putting it to the test, and then putting that resilience into action. So there you have it. That's my little brief intro for what we're going to look at today. And we go for about an hour. Because it's an hour, the purpose of these webinars is just to introduce you to some simple concepts that we train more in depth in the EED courses. And we have lots of past webinars on the YouTube channel. That's EE Dynamics. You can collect all those webinars together and get a really good idea of what we're training and teaching. And with all of these webinars, you can walk away with some practical tips and tools that will deepen your understanding of the change process, how to enhance your coaching or leadership or personal development. And most of all, to understand how the dynamics of how we interact with each other in relationship. The webinars give you lots of context, some practical tools. The courses give you the practice and the supervision. So if these concepts interest you, then I welcome you to go to the website essence-dynamics.com and look into what we're offering for courses and trainings. Otherwise, simply enjoy the webinar. And if you appreciate the work that we present in the webinars, then come join us live as often as you can. Feel free to make a donation if you wish, because I need to eat sometimes. And I have been always offering these for free for the past few years. So, and I like to pick up on things that maybe are not talked about often, or might be a little taboo. And I like to present those hot topics or issues through the lens of EED and show you just how simply those issues can be handled through the EED model or its concepts. Does that bring up any specific questions around testing resilience or EED from you guys? Okay. And if along the way you do have questions or comments, feel free to interrupt me. I love interaction. And again, I want to make this relevant for you. So just to recap here, what are we discovering? Basically, we're looking at the art of provocation. Now, this is an introduction to the art of provocation. There's lots we could say about it, but I'm really looking at how do you capture natural resistance to further reinforce resilience and move that into inspired action. So, you know, if you're a coach, you're going to get lots of clients. They're going to say, hey, I have this problem. I'm facing this challenge. And we want to get some natural resonance going on. We want to make them feel inspired. But many times coaches just stop there. They say, wow, you're really inspired. You're ready to go. What will you do? How will I know? When will I know that? And then the client comes back and they say, well, I didn't do it. My energy deflated. So, and some coaches are afraid of the resistance that'll come by. They'll say, why is my client resisting this or that idea? Or we just get inspired, and as soon as I ask them to go into action, the energy drops. So I have a way to work with that and to overcome it, that in fact, the initial resistance you meet with a person or with a client, you won't interact with it completely at the beginning, but you'll save it for later. Because then once you've shifted their mindset, once you've started to build up some really good energies and anchored that resilient energy, you can bring those initial fears and resistance back to see the difference. Is that mindset really holding true? Okay. And what always happens with EED, when I walk people through the whole process of it, all those initial fears and doubts and resistance just kind of falls away, and they're not standing strong like a warrior. They are just standing very resilient within themselves, very autonomous, and they're like, yeah, I can take that on, no problem. That does not dissuade me. So I'll show you some simple ways to test the integrity of a person's strength, their desires, their ideas, their creativity, which will ultimately give them more fuel and congruence within themselves when they take action. So that it's not like, hey, I've got this good idea, but I got this inner resistance. That's an inner conflict. What we want is alignment and congruency so that it can move forward with efficiency and with enthusiasm. And then what happens if the inspiration deflates? What happens if the energy collapses? I'm giving you some tips to recapture that momentum, and you can embed that in with the client when you're creating, say, some accountability with them on, so what will you do? How will I know? And then I've got some other great questions you can ask beyond that, so that they can pick themselves back up on their own without needing to call you and say, give me some more of that good juice that you gave me during the session. All right. Good. Does this create any further comments or questions here from you guys? Okay. So, yeah, very briefly now, for those of you that already know emergent essence dynamics, this will be old news. For those watching the recording, you can fast forward a couple of minutes. By the way, if you want to do the quick view of this webinar, for those watching the recording, fast forward to the last 15 minutes because I give a good summary. And then you can rewind and say, well, how'd they talk about this, that, and the other? Because I'm walking you through things. I like to be thorough and in depth, and then I like to sum it up at the end. So EED focuses on our patterns of behavior. And it actually is a universal model that can apply to coaching, leadership, mediation, facilitation, healing, therapy, anything, and especially self-development. It's It's looking at how do we act and behave. We're all in relationship. We all are following patterns in those relationships. We're all acting and reacting. So EED is capturing those patterns, and then it's able to shift and neutralize some of the patterns and rebuild new patterns. So everything is all about patterns. Every action and behavior is following a unique fractal pattern that is working in cycles. What that means is we're doing the same things over and over and over and over again on all levels. We just may not be aware of it. Once we become aware of what's driving us, then we're aware of what's driving the issue. Then we can be aware of what exactly is our personal process of transformation. So sustainable change, because there's lots of debate about, well, is that, really a permanent change or not? Is it going to stick? Sustainable change will naturally occur once we've reconciled those patterns, but that must be done in a resilient state. And resilience means we are connected to our permanent, timeless self, our permanent and timeless nature, the part of us that feels unconditional. Which means when we're in that state, we're basically saying, I'm okay here. And then we're more receptive. And we're not clinging to things. We're not clinging to beliefs. We're not clinging to values or perspectives. We're able to actually detach from that and rearrange ourselves. So what is EED really doing? It's drilling down into the source code that's driving the entire program. That's a simple way of saying it. So there's three things we focus on. First, building resilience and autonomy. That is the foundation for transformation because we're more receptive to change. We're not wasting time resisting it. Then we're looking at what are the relationship dynamics? What are all the actions and behaviors going on? Action, reaction. And this is what we're going to talk about with the art of provocation, is how do you get those actions and behaviors going? And through the relationship dynamics, those relationship patterns will reveal the cycles that we're going through, which actually simplifies the change process, because change can look really complex, so many details to take care of, when actually there's a simple pattern driving the whole thing. So how do we drill down and see what's the core thing going on? So in our courses, we have 3 core modules. The first one focuses on building resilience. The second one focuses on neutralizing resistance and working with all forms of resistance. And then the third module reconciles the two together so we can take creative action. Does that bring up any questions? And welcome, Suhair. It's good to see you as well. I see something in the chat here. I'm just going to check quickly. Yeah, all right. Yeah, so that's fine. You can, for those of you, yeah. I love it when you have comments and questions. If you want to stay only in listening mode, that is okay too. All right. Moving on, why would we want to use provocation? In the past, I've had comments and feedback from people, oh, I can't provoke, it's too dramatic, too cruel. Well, what does provocation do? And I guess I'll have to define what I mean by provocation, which I'll do in a second here. What it really does is it just creates the direct experience of resilience. Resilience then is not an idea, it is felt, it is experienced, it's acted upon, it's received. And it's through provocation that we can reinforce the resilience because we're putting the resilience in action right now. We're not talking about it. Oh, how resilient do you feel? Oh, I feel really strong and resilient, and wow, that's so great. And well, why not poke it and test it? Because that's really what we mean by provocation. Give it a poke. So I'll give you a metaphor. If I say, I have a nice bouncy ball, I'm not just going to hold it and look at it or put it under a glass and say, look at my precious bouncy ball. No, I want to see if it bounces. So I pick up that ball, I throw it against the wall. If it shatters, then it was not a bouncy ball. If it bounces, then it's a bouncy ball. This is what we mean by provocation. I don't take your word for it. I want you to show me. How am I going to get you to show me? I'm going to give you a poke where you are compelled to show me. Does that make sense? Or does that sound too strong? You're good with that? Okay. So what it does is provocation compels action and behavior, and it moves us away from the level of words and explanations and justifications. To believe it, you got to see it. You got to experience it. Okay? So it takes us off the level of idea and puts it into reality, is another way to say it. So why would we do that? Because that is going to reinforce what is true, not what is talked about. It's going to reinforce integrity so that a person is more aligned with their inner wisdom, their inner source, with their essence. The essence then will have congruency to express itself, meaning what's going on at the essential level is also reflected in the emotions, in the actions, in the words, in the behaviors, in the mental thoughts, in the ideas. Okay, so all levels, mental, emotional, physical, all line up, and all of that is plugged into the essence of the person, their inner source, not their external source. We've talked about that in the last webinar, the difference between an inner source and an external source, which I'll get back to in a bit. So provocation will help clean up any self-deception. And what it's going to do is it's going to surface what truly is strong and what is truthful on a simple level. Now, provocation, I mean, what do you guys see provocation as? Because a lot of us think it has to be dramatic, it has to be forceful, it has to be cruel. I've been provoking you this whole time. I make strong statements. I come from a strong point of view. This is basically what we teach in our module 1 is how do you develop a strong point of view? Why? Because your strong point of view will bring a strong response, all right? What provocation is, it's just simply this, poke. It's an action and a reaction, okay? It is intentional. It's designed to produce a response. That is it. It's not about convincing someone, coercing someone. It is not about pushing someone to your point of view or bias, or for you to think, hey, you need to be bigger than that and better than that and make sure that they're going to be in that bigger, better place. No, it simply is a poke. Okay? They will find their own 2 feet. All right? So if somebody says, hey, I'm perfectly balanced, you say, really? Boom, poke. Oh, and they'll balance themselves. Oh, and poke, and they'll balance themselves. Or, hey, I'm perfectly balanced. Oh, really? Poke, and they fall over. So then they weren't really balanced. So then how will they get themselves to have that stability and that balance, all right? That's the purpose of the poke. Is that making sense to you guys, what I'm saying? Or am I talking too fast? All right, sounds good, okay. So then the question is, well, is it safe to do? Yes, as long as you capture the response. And with that, you're capturing the resilient energy in the response, okay? You're not capturing the weakness. You're not capturing what's missing. You're not capturing the criticism. You're capturing what is that survival response from the poke, okay? So if I'm saying, hey, are you going to fall over? I'm capturing what's bringing them back to stability. I'm capturing what are the muscles that are tensing up that hold everything intact. I'm not saying, oh, look how far you leaned back. That's too far. That's the weakness, all right? What's bringing you back into the resilience, all right? We'll talk later about how you can build an energy and then you purposefully collapse it with the intent that it's going to rebuild itself. It's that rebuilding, all right? That's what we're focused on in the response. So in fact, it's always positive. So basic concept, if there's a truth, test it. The truth will stand. The truth doesn't go away. It doesn't disappear. If there's resilience, test it. The resilience will be there. It will show itself. If I'm afraid to test the truth, I'll never know if it's the truth. If I'm afraid to test the resilience, then I won't know if something is truly resilient. It's just an idea, okay? And I really want to underline that. It's no longer an idea. It's no longer a promise. It's no longer a concept. It's a reality. How do I make it a reality? Give it a poke and see if it is in integrity. Any questions or comments there? What feels fascinating or interesting or threatening here? If there's anything.
It seems like in order to do this properly, you'll have to keep your ego in check, though, because it's easy to provoke people, or, are your motives pure? I guess, and that's the difficult thing to keep track of.
Yeah, and that takes a self-discipline, a self-management, and we focus on that during the trainings, is how do you keep yourself clean? By the way, that's going to be the next webinar. How do you keep yourself clean? Okay, what's the discipline involved? So that you don't run amok with starting to let your ego run the show, where you say, I'm the expert, or I'm the savior, or I'm the guru. No, the focus is on what is resilient in this person now. All right. And all you're doing is facilitating, guiding, poking, and seeing always what the response is. So by the way, that is the basics of the EED model, which I'll show you in the next slide here. Is everything is based on action and response, and you're more focused on the response, not on what you're doing to poke or provoke. That's just a mechanism to draw out the response, get the response. So yeah, you must be very clean. That's a very good point, Jason. Anything else? Okay. So let me just switch here. So this is a portion of the EED model. And we've got two repeating loops going on. We've got what we call the primary loop, which is that is responsible for the rhythm and flow of the dialogue, of the interaction. It's all focused on behavior and energy through action and reaction. So if you're the coach, you can provoke, and you always want to invite the response. You don't just want to provoke and then bulldoze the client. For everything you say or do, there is a response in the client. That is very, very important. Now, there is a lot of coaching that goes on where all they do is invite response. And this is where you can get that circular coaching going on, where it's just question after question after question, and it doesn't seem to lead anywhere. If you inject a little bit of a statement, an articulation, provoke, then see what happens, you can start co-creating with the client and guiding them, and they can guide you, because they're also in action and response. You're having responses just as much as they are. So this is a two-way street of action response. You're both actually provoking each other. You're responsible as the coach or the leader or facilitator to stay clean. They are not responsible for that. Your job is to keep refocusing them into their resilience, to bring them more into awareness of how they're acting and reacting. Then they can make choices on what they want to do about it. So that brings us to the second loop, is with each action and response, the response is going to happen something's going to happen in their mind, in their awareness. Something is also going to happen in their body and their emotions, which we'll call experience. What you want is that you want both going on together, so you can create more congruency between what they're aware of and what they're experiencing. So you're inviting response for them to go look at what they're experiencing or experience it, and then also take a check in to see, what am I aware of here by the thing that provoked me? So all four are working together. These are simultaneous. Go ahead, Benjamin. Yeah.
Troy, the primary loop and the focus loop, it appeared to me as you elaborated over both, that the primary loop is rather connecting to the energy, making the energy available, whereas the focus loop is giving direction to the energy.
Yes, and then our third loop, the embodiment loop, is actually where you're sculpting that energy. Okay, so Would I say the focus loop? Focus loop is
and
about focusing. It's what you're
whether
focused
you would
on.
second this or not. That was basically my question.
Yeah, I'd say it's less about directing the energy at this point. It's more about focusing the energy. So there's two things. Okay, so if I'm provoking, I'm also focusing, what am I provoking? Something that's going on in their awareness or their mind? Am I focusing on something that's going on in their emotional or body experience? Then I want to, if I've provoked something going on in their experience, I also want to, them to invite the response from their body, from their emotion. Like, how does that feel when I say or do that? Or how does your body respond when I say or do that? What's physically happening? But then I want to tie it to the awareness too. And then what happens to your awareness when you feel that? So if you're feeling sad, what are you thinking? And then what is your body doing? I want these three levels all lining up, okay? So that's what I mean by focusing. I want them focused on both areas. What am I aware of? What am I experiencing? For everything I experience, there's a new awareness. For everything I'm aware of, there's a new experience. And what happens is they gradually come together. Why would I want to do that? I'm getting less resistance because then I'm getting less inner conflict and I'm surfacing more truth from the person because they're showing me truth. Then they become aware of the truth and they experience their truth, okay? I will not surface anything without the primary loop because that's what is the catalyst. It's the action response that gets things flowing, moving. That's why I'm saying it's rhythm and flow. And so the Art of Provocation takes all of this in together. And then what I can zoom in on here with you guys is, what do we mean by provoke action? What do we mean by invite response? Okay, how does that primary loop actually work? All right. How we doing here? Good, okay. So, why would I test resilience? Because I really want to get people into creative action. I want to get them in integrity with themselves. I want to get them congruent. I want to get them accessing energies that they're producing themselves. They're not relying on me to produce it. I want to get them triggering themselves. I want to get them aware of themselves. Those are like preliminary steps into inspired creative action. So what's the process? It's really 4 steps. We want to spark energy and build it up, okay? And what we mean by that is resilient energy. Now, there are other webinars where I go in more detail with that. How do you do it? And we learn that all through module 1 is how do you build the energy and then how do you anchor the energy? And what I want to focus on then is this 3rd step is how do you test the integrity of the energy? Because what I've seen happen, and I've supervised for what, 12, 15 years. I don't know how long it's been. Since 2005, actually. So it's, 15 years. I see coaches, leaders, facilitators, they can capture a resonant energy. They might anchor it, but then they're rushing into action. Oh, what can we do with this? What's possible? And let's go and act upon it. What they don't think to do or know to do is to test the integrity first before sending someone into action. Oh, wow, that's great inspiration, great possibilities, great. What if that doesn't work? What do you mean? Or, so you're a warrior. Okay, so let's have sword fight here. Now, what's it like if I come at you and attack? Oh, well, I've got my warrior stance. Oh, really? Boom, I can push you over. So we need to test the integrity of what they say they think they're experiencing. Are they truly experiencing it? And if it's not a match, let's make it a match. So it's not about criticizing. It's not about bursting their bubble just to be mean. What it is let me be the outside world in a safe environment and let's see if this will stand, okay? And just, I know I'm kind of repeating myself, but I have to really emphasize that because I just don't see it done And then I used to get, supervision students coming back to me and say, why is my client never actually taking the action they promised? Well, probably because it wasn't well anchored and it wasn't tested. Because it's a further step to reinforce the energy when they go into action. Because then by testing, you're reinforcing the energy, they're ready for action, then you can capitalize on what's the strength they're using, what's the willpower that's surfacing, what's the real desire behind this action, and that is what creates self-accountability. Because then they're willing to face the challenges as opposed to, let's just be idealistic and hope the world is on my side because I have such a good idea. How does it sound what I'm saying? Because I'm being a little bit sarcastic. One of the purposes is great, you have a great idea, but I'm not going to remain in idealism. Do you understand? I need to bring the idea into reality. And what's going on in reality? There is resistance and challenge. So let's introduce that a little bit at a time, okay? Maybe a little later, I can go a little bit more into what do I mean about self-accountability? What are some questions you can ask, okay? Instead of what will you do by when and how will I know? Because that's kind of a common accountability thing. So like, why am I saying all this? Because this was from the last webinar when we talked about the resilient self and the pathetic self, and we looked at what's the relationship between the two. So when we're taking resilient creative action, we're actually taking action from this side where we are plugged into our inner source of essence. We're not desperately seeking an external source. We're not operating from disconnection. Because when we're operating from disconnection, we're more concerned about control. We're more concerned about validation, answering two questions. Do I exist? And how can I make sure I exist? Because the main question is, am I okay? So I want to build a house. I need to build a house because I need to be secure. I need, or I need to have status in the neighborhood. Or, whereas the resiliency self says, I want a house, so I'm going to build it. That's it. Because I can. But the pathetic self will say, well, wait, and the resilient self says, yeah, I can survive out in the street. I'll find a way. Pathetic self says, yeah, but you'll be cold. So build a house. We need that house. Resilient self says, yeah, okay, fine. So the pathetic self is there to provide some resistance, provide some ways to identify problems, but the pathetic self is not the one that's to take the creative action. We pass that over to the resilient self. There are ways to plug that into essence. I've discussed that in other webinars. When I'm saying test the resilience, you actually want to reintroduce the pathetic self with its concerns, problems, disconnection, and see if this connection withstands. If we've plugged resilience back into source, and then we can take that back out to action, and we create this two-way street, like a secure conduit of electricity. It won't snap. So we need to bend the wire. We need to try to cut the wire and see if it snaps. That's where we reintroduce the pathetic self back to the resilient self. We put them in relation to each other. Let me know if I'm talking too fast or going over your head, or if this produces questions. I'm assuming that you've seen the other webinar. That's why I'm talking like this. So go to the YouTube channel and watch webinar number 2, where we really spin this out in detail. Because what I did not talk about in the last webinar was I talked more about how do we, focus on the resilient self, but then how do we reintroduce the pathetic self? That is what we're doing to test resilience. We use the pathetic self to reintroduce the problem and to see if the resilience remains, okay? Because sometimes it'll collapse and we'll just go back to pathetic self. Oh no, I'm overcome by fear again. So rebuild the resilience, reintroduce a little bit of fear, and then the reaction usually is, it's not a problem. So it's like we're magnetizing the original problem with resilience, and then we can reintroduce the problem and it doesn't become problem energy. It becomes creative opportunity. So it's a way of retraining the mind We're shifting the relationship to the problem so that the person remains in resilience and does not default into the pathetic self or disconnection. Any comments, questions there? What's making sense to you guys? Can you just testing you to see if you actually get this or if you're just trying to get me to move on? Go ahead, James.
I feel like I'm getting it. It just, yeah. It's all making sense to me.
How does it apply to, because I know you're a coach, how does it apply to how you're working, or how does it shift how you will continue working?
It's just brought home again when you do provoke to be very conscious of what's bringing them back into resilience, you know, and to focus on that.
Yeah. I want to speak to that because I know a lot of coaches, they want to build the resilience or they want to believe that the client is resourceful, but what they can do is get into their own pathetic self and start making that resonant energy or inspiration very precious, and they don't, once they've got it, they don't want to disturb it. It's like, phew, okay, we've got a value here activated or a new perspective, and then they don't want to disturb it. And what that's actually doing, it's reinforcing fragility as opposed to resilience. Okay, so they're best to, yes, when the energy first appears, protect it so that you can give it a chance to take root and grow and strengthen itself. You want to anchor it so it's in the mind, the emotion, the body, well aligned. Then you want to start poking around. That's why that's the third stage. Don't make it precious anymore. Okay, so hey, we built up a great plan, a great idea. Now let's start poking holes in it. And like you said, James, see how the client responds. And you want to refocus them to keep responding from resilience. Sometimes they will not. They may collapse and go back into that fear. So then you say, well, okay, no need to fix that. What was your original access point to the resilience? What was your original inspiration? You want them to learn how to re-trigger themselves, because this is what's going to happen in the real world. They're going to start taking action on their plan. They get the first curveball, they get the first challenge, and they go, oh God, maybe it wasn't a good idea, right? And then they give up. Okay, fine, didn't work, a little bit of failure. Now, re-access, re-trigger the resonance and the resilience. Now go approach the failure again and say, what can I learn from it? Now what's it telling me? But they got to re-access the resilience first, then re-strategize. Yeah, you're going to say something there, James?
No.
I saw you unmuted. So, okay. Ideally, what we're doing with EED through the 3 modules is creating this healthy relationship between resilient self, pathetic self, so they're working together as opposed to being competitive with each other. It's not an either or, it's both. They each have their function. So one function of pathetic self is, at first, we don't want to engage with it. We want to focus on building resilience and plugging it in, but then we want to re-engage with the pathetic self to see how it can further provoke the resilience to reinforce itself. And then that resilience gives more creativity back to the pathetic self, so we can actually approach and then take action with her to our problems, okay? And, you know, or issues or whatever you want, or projects, whatever you want to say. Okay, so let's get into some practical tips on what can you actually do. So you'll reintroduce some previous moments of fear or resistance, meaning add a little bit of trouble to the mix. So again, what I'm saying is third stage. You've sparked some energy, you've built up the resilience, you've plugged it in, you've anchored the resilience, you've got some good energy flowing, the client's feeling good, they're feeling inspired, or if you're working with yourself, you feel good and inspired, okay? Now, go back to some of those original moments of fear or resistance. Like, well, what if they laugh at me? Or what if, you know, somebody says I'm foolish? Or what if somebody says I'm crazy? Or, well, what if the website looks ugly? Or, you know, whatever, and choose small things. So I always envision it like throw a little turd at them. Just a little turd, just a little one. Okay, a little rabbit pellet of turd. Throw it there and see what happens. Now, what might happen at first is if it's not so, I mean, they will get destabilized, but you want to see, oh, they get a little shaken, and then how are they restabilizing themselves and returning to the resilient energy? Sometimes they might just completely collapse and go, oh my God, yeah, I don't want to be a fool. I don't want them to think I'm crazy. Oh God, maybe that wasn't a good idea. Whoa, 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 wait a minute. Don't indulge in the problem. Go back to the resilience. What is this giving you? How does this feed your well-being? This resilient energy. What's the strength you're connected to here? What does that make you capable of? How do you feel towards yourself? All of these are resilience building questions, because what you're doing is you're recycling the energy back into their well-being, enjoyment, and pleasure. All right. And they become more receptive, they become more relaxed, they become more stabilized within themselves. What are you plugged into? What feels permanent and timeless here? Well, I feel like I'm connected to abundance. I feel like I am a creator. I feel like I'm invincible. Great. Oh, so boom, you're crazy. Okay. Now it's more stabilized, right? Because they want to be focused on the resilience of that it brings them, the resilience they're experiencing. They can take a dagger or two. Okay, it's not that they're not going to feel pain. Ooh, that hurt, but it doesn't destroy me. It actually fuels me on. Okay, that's the kind of response. So what we're looking for is, we'll throw a little bit of trouble at them, see how they destabilize, refocus them on what they're plugged into, throw it again. They'll become more and more stable. With each repetition of throwing a little bit of trouble, they will stabilize a little more, because what you're really doing is you're daring to collapse the energy and see how they rebuild it. Collapse it, rebuild, collapse it, rebuild. That's actually training the synapses in the brain. Do it in a pleasurable, humorous, irreverent environment. Okay, don't be so cruel and serious while you're doing this. I mean, bring in some laughter and some fun, because we'll build those synapses faster through pleasure. All right. Any questions or comments there before I move to the next point? How's this working for you? Okay. So like I said, dare to collapse the energy after it is anchored. I told you that then we can collapse, rebuild, collapse, rebuild, collapse, rebuild. It's like repetition with slight variation. If you try, so sometimes it sounds counterintuitive. We spent all this time, say, building the client up into this very highly resonant space. They're ready to go, they're inspired. Why would I want to collapse that? Well, because once they get out the door, they might deflate at the first obstacle, and they don't know how to recapture it. They'll say, how did we get it so good during the session? I don't feel the same now. So what it's really doing when you dare to collapse the energy after it's anchored, they're going to become more conscious and aware of how they're actually experiencing the energy, how that energy is functioning, how it's working, how it's actually constructed in them, okay? It's a further anchoring, okay? Put a little pressure on it, so it has to give some pressure back. It's like, and so when I'm saying after it's anchored, because think of it as you've just planted a seed, you've got a new energy growing, it's delicate, okay? It needs to grow roots like a little plant, needs to get a stronger stem before you expose it to the strong winds and the rain and the animals that are gonna step on the plant, okay? The plant is, once it's well rooted and it has a strong enough stem, you can step on it and it'll spring back. But if if you introduce those strong elements too soon, you're going to kill the plant. Okay? So new energies, you think of it like a little seed that is just sprouted. You've got to spend time protecting it while you build, while you anchor, then lift the protection and expose it, okay, to the elements and see how it survives. And keep encouraging it to thrive, thrive, thrive. Any questions there, comments? All right. If the energy is anchored, here's another way. Take it away. Oh, I'm a warrior and I'm feeling so joyful. Okay, great. Let's take that joy away. Oh, you took my joy. Well, then it wasn't anchored. It wasn't unconditional. It's not like you can't take my joy, because they're clinging to it, right? Swipe it. Try to take it. Hammer at it. And they'll say, no, it's a permanent part of me. The joy cannot be destroyed. All right? That's resilient, because if you take it away, it can't be. It's a permanent part of their nature. If you can take it away, or they give it away, or they lose it, or they cling, it's not properly anchored. Am I explaining this well? Is it okay? Or any questions here? So again, it's like, let's say you're working with a perspective, or you're working with some values. Oh, I have a value of chocolate, or I have the birthday cake perspective. Well, I'm just going to go step on that birthday cake, or I'm not going to let you have the chocolate, right? So the usual resilient response is, no, can't, it's impossible. You can't do that. And it's not defensive, and it has no energy of fight or defense, okay? It's just a simple fact. Truth is truth. That's it. Not threatened. Is that making sense to you guys? So if you've got a suspicion that you got a false energy going on, take it away. Take it away from them. And if they cling to grab it back, then it needs more anchoring. You could, after you've done a little bit of testing here, you could go further. You could start to aggravate their doubts or fears to spin it out to the very end and see what the response is. So you can add more and more levels. This, by the way, is also something you can do in the very beginning to spark some resilience. Oh, I have this fear that I might fail. Well, you're a guaranteed failure. Now I've spun it out 100% to the end. And what I'm looking for is the resilient response, which usually is, what do you mean? What do you mean I'm a complete failure? I'm not a complete failure. That's a resilient response. Because there is an energy in there that believes I can succeed. I do believe in myself, okay? That again is who's speaking, pathetic self, resilient self. So if you aggravate doubt or fear to its extreme and then capture the response, you're capturing the resilience contained in there. Because sometimes we put preponderance onto our doubts and fear and we forget that there's resilience behind it, all right? So spin out the nightmare to the end and see what the response is. Whatever you're doing, always endow that person with resilience and capability. Okay? You're not doing this to be mean, evil, or malevolent. All right? You're not throwing those little rabbit turds at them to see, how turdy their face can get. You're looking at how the turd actually bounces off their face. Okay? And even if they're in doubt of themselves, you're still endowing them with, there's a capability here. There is a resilient energy, even if it's buried under layers and layers and layers. I'm appealing to that, okay? And how can you do that? How can you remind yourself? So that whatever energy is showing up, whether that's a resilient energy, maybe it's a creative vision, maybe there's a good solid strategy coming into play or a plan that they're making. Don't treat it like it's perfect or precious. Just because they have it does not mean it's precious. Okay, anchor their belief behind it, anchor their enjoyment behind it, anchor their desire behind it, but also inject a little bit of healthy irreverence with some humor. Poke a little hole in the vision, poke a little hole in the strategy, and see how they handle it, because then you're putting their creativity into action. And when they do that, they're going to take action with creativity. All right. If it's all precious, like, I don't want to ruin the plan, I don't want to ruin the vision, what you're doing is you're putting a frame around that vision behind glass, and it's being put up on a wall, and it's getting worshipped, and nobody can touch it. That makes it fragile and precious. Anything to say there or comment? I see some heads nodding. Yeah, go ahead, Benjamin. Yeah.
2 points. The first relates to the first bullet point. We introduced previous moments of fear or resistance. No, the second. So it's basically the coach setting, which happens usually in a safe environment, distinct from everyday life of that person. So I can't just transfer and apply the stuff I learned under different conditions in those real life conditions. So that's what I feel why anchoring is usually often skipped, facing problems for the usual coaching stuff. What is your experience? You mentioned you supervised coaches in that regard as well. What is your experience about the difference from you? Would you mind sharing an example of a client or whatever?
Do you mean of anchoring of, I mean,
right,
how to anchor?
How to do it better, right?
Okay, right.
Yeah.
This relates back to our embodiment loop, which is 4 phases: spark, connect, voice, embody. And the anchoring is happening more so in the embodiment last phase. And there's other webinars where we go through this embodiment loop. What I see a lot is the client has a aha moment or a little bit of inspiration. The coach can build that up, okay, into some higher energy.
Yeah.
And then they ask immediately, well, what's possible here? Or what will you do? And I say, not yet. Because it's too soon. It's more like the coach is going, phew, we're no longer in that resistance or fear phase anymore. Now we're into some inspiration. And it's almost as if it's coming from their own desperation to move on. And sometimes, I'll discuss this in the next webinar, they're there to want to help, they want to save or whatever. They want the client to feel good or go into a good place. Of course, we all want that. But patience, it's like you've got an elastic band. So you've got a little bit of inspiration. Well, stretch it. Make them stay in the inspiration. Make them get to know the inspiration, how the inspiration is affecting them, how it's charging them up. Have them really create relationship. That's what we mean by the connect phase in the embodiment loop. Create relationship with the good energy, the inspiration. Then they can start voicing possibilities, but still, before any commitment to action, how do all those possibilities feed back to their strength? How does it reinforce them? How does it feed their well-being? What is still getting charged up? And then before we even go to action there, we want to make them conscious and aware of how this energy is operating in them. What's the particular body center that's most activated? What's the posture? What's the mindset? What's the feeling? What's the sensation of this energy running through them? They're aware of possibilities. But now they're really getting to know themselves. They need to know the benefits, okay? That's part of the anchoring process. Then, okay, what will you do to apply that energy somewhere so that you're actively using it and it's feeding back to you? That can apply back to either creating a habit to keep accessing the energy, an exercise, It could be a simple action to just provide proof that the energy works, or it could be action directly related to the issue. Yes, I feel very confident now. I feel very open. I feel like a warrior, don't need to fight or defend, and I stand my ground. I'm ready to have that conversation with my boss. Fine. Well, there's an application. Now, that's the anchoring, okay? You get them in the body posture. You get them to understand where the source of the energy is, what the energy brings, okay? You notice how many questions I'm listing here. So I'm really pulling back the elastic. Then, boom, the client says, I can't wait to get into action, okay? Now I can go test it. I can say, oh, all right. So you're ready. You're walking into your boss's office. You're asking for that promotion. Okay, boss says, wow, you've been performing so well over the last, 5 years. But no, you're not going to get that promotion. I'm giving that to somebody else. Oh. So now what? Do you just walk out of the office and leave? Or are you standing your ground? Or what are you going to do here, right? So get them reactivated. Let's hear the word no a few times. What's your response? Pretty soon you've magnetized them so the no doesn't collapse them. That they can actually hear the word no with some acceptance. Then they can get into creative options. Well, okay, I understand what you're saying. No, you want to give it to somebody else. And here's what I've been doing. And like get them into, negotiation. And then if by the end they fought the fight, they're still getting the no, and they can still walk out feeling, I did a good job arguing my point. Now they're not walking into that office feeling fearful or desperate or like they need to manipulate their boss into saying yes. Do you understand where I'm going here? Like you're setting them up to walk in fully resilient, autonomous, and fair, where they're not going to back down at the first discouragement, or they're not going to overreact to the first discouragement. Yeah, I saw you nodding there, James. What does this say to you, or anything to comment on there?
I just love it. I really do. That's how I'd want to be treated, actually. I mean, the reverse sounds completely wrong to send them in there, in the boss's office without kind of preparing them. And this poking is a way of preparing them.
Yeah, it's a test.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, of course, I want to acknowledge you for your strength and your courage, and I want to champion you, that you have potential, you're so creative. But let's put it to the test. As opposed to you walking in there with this thought, well, my coach said, or, well, it felt so good in the session. Why don't you understand me? Because I'm actually coming from a fragile place, right? So I got certified by so-and-so, my best friend, who said I deserved this promotion. Why don't you think the same? I'm on the defensive, right? So yeah, it's actually not realistic. So it's good to be idealistic. It's good to be encouraging. Now let's bring that down to earth, right? So that you truly are. It's that you're earning your place, but also you're energetically creating your place. You're not entitled to your promotion. Okay. If that sounds okay. Yeah, I'm not going to talk about this much, but it's just that as we move through our creative cycle, there is natural resistance that's going to, work against us, but we can use that to move forward. And this is basically what I'm talking about is so if we're generating energy, once the energy is charged up enough, you can actually introduce some of that resistance to see if the energy will charge further. Because if the energy collapses, then the desire, vision, or strategy isn't that strong. Okay, and then when they're moving into action, you can bring in some doubt and fear so that they hold back from the action. Well, they can incorporate that resistance to actually improve their actions, and they can harvest bigger fruits. But you can play that role of resistance. That's what I mean by testing the resilience. Is you embody some of that resistance and see how they react. And the advantage of that is, why is it a safe environment? because you're constantly endowing the client as a resilient being. Whereas other people out there in the world can just be playing cruel, and they want to deflate you so that they can trample on top of you. That's not what you're doing as a coach or a leader. You're introducing them to some natural resistance they may meet, but you're also highly aware and inviting the response from their resilience while they grapple with the resistance. I want to make that really, 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 really clear. And webinar 1 and 2 of this year really breaks this map down, especially webinar 1. So yeah, we got courses happening this month. You're going to learn all about. I know James and Benjamin have taken the courses. Peter, you're thinking about it. And for those watching the recording, well, this is where you get all the practice and supervision, because I can talk, but you got to do. And that's where we have the time. You get 3 full days to do. And module 1 is where you're going to learn all of this that we discussed today. You get introduced to that. You get further introduced to it in module 2, where we work more directly with resistance. And then module 3 is all about that diagram of the creative cycle. And we have specific tools and techniques for each phase. I had mentioned before, our next webinar is, I'm calling it the coach's dilemma. And what I mean by that is, it's like what Jason mentioned a lot earlier, that you've got to keep yourself clean. How do you remain clean? Because there are temptations to move out of the coach role, whether it's by your own doing or by the client inviting you, where you can become a guru, an expert, a savior, a helper, a fixer, and those aren't clean. But you can borrow from those roles. And that's what we're going to show you, is you're not eliminating those roles. You're keeping a primary role of clean facilitator, and then you can borrow from the other roles as a further way to provoke the client's resilience, okay? So, hey, Benjamin, it's just you and me now, because I know I went a little over time. Love to know what you're taking away, and then I'll be doing the summary. Yeah.
So I need to sum it up for everyone who has just left.
Yeah, I know.
What is this? So let's give it a try.
Yeah.
What is sticking with me? Well, you want them to learn how to re-trigger themselves. That's an interesting thing I noted down. As anchoring, my understanding, the main takeaway is the understanding of anchoring. What is the function of anchoring? Well, to make this thing available, you have in this coaching setting available in different situations and under different conditions. So to make that transfer autonomous, yeah, I would say so. So to make that happen, so that would be basically that transfer, the bridging towards reality, from coach setting towards reality. And mostly that's what I feel, as you mentioned earlier, too, that bridging isn't really happening. That's why in the coach setting,
or it doesn't happen enough. I haven't seen it happen enough. Yeah.
Not on a regular reproducible basis, basically. And I appreciate, secondly, so gives them sort of a little trouble at them, see how they restabilize, and then connect that what is showing up before doing any action. So that intermediate operation sort of, I find that particularly important. Yeah, remarkable.
The testing resilience is a further stage of anchoring, is maybe the best way I could summarize it. Like you said, there's anchoring, but then the testing of the resilience to collapse and rebuild further anchors, and that creates the ownership of the new energy and of the new mindset. So the person isn't walking away with, what did so-and-so say, or what did my coach say? No, they know exactly how it works. And that's what gives them the independence, because they have the ownership of the new energy and the new mindset.
Right.
And that's what I saw missing a lot of times. And without that ownership, it creates dependency. Now that could be good for somebody's business, where you get clients coming back and saying, how did we do that again? And how did we do that again? But that doesn't honor the client's own autonomy. Okay. And in my personal opinion, I think it's unethical to make a person feel good, keep them dependent on you, and actually, whether that's purposeful or not, but you kind of count on them deflating so they'll come back so they can be rebuilt. But it's not you that does the rebuilding. They must do the rebuilding. My philosophy is, I get a client in, they're wearing the training wheels, they're learning how to ride the bike, but I got to take the training wheels off. They cannot need me forever, but they can use me for a period of time so that they create a new ownership of themselves and a new awareness of themselves, right? So my idea is they come in the revolving door and they go out, all right? And I'm just building a bridge, and that's it, okay? Some may agree, some may not agree. But frankly, that's how I see a lot of the self-help industry working, is they're creating these dependencies because they aren't going these steps further to test and train you in your own resilience. They're not testing it, and they're not encouraging you to test it. They're just saying, go out and do it and you'll be a success and you'll win the lottery.
But there's basically a gap between both worlds. The coach world, where you're coached in that coach room, safe conditions, whatever. So it's a non-dangerous environment, and there's real life.
Oh, you know, that's a good point. Is yes, we start in the safe environment, but we've got to start taking the safety away.
Right. So gradually, you don't jump from this. If there's something sparks up, you just don't jump from this into real life.
Exactly.
This is failing on a regular basis. I suspect what we are doing here, we are gradually taking a little from the real life into the coach setting.
That's
until it's equivalent.
Yeah,
and once it's equivalent, you can just swap them, and you don't know the difference anymore.
That's right.
That's the beauty of that.
That's right.
The antithesis to that would be the psychological safety stuff. So make the real world a safe haven like coaching. No, that's not going to work.
No, because what it's going to do is it's censoring everything in the world. What we want to do is build an internal safety and resilience so they can go out to the big bad elements and remain intact and creative. I'm not asking the world to match my coaching room or my leadership room.
So it's for me, it's process of creating the right dose of reality that stabilizes your connection to resilient essence.
And you're bringing in an excellent point, that the whole purpose of testing resilience is to build that bridge back into the real world, or to slowly take away the safe space and you bring in the real space. So it's not a shock for the person.
Once they are equivalent in their dangerousness or so, you have resilience there in place, and you can just swap the situations. That's the beauty of the stuff. And then you're able to do it in the coach set. If you can do it in the coach setting with all the dangerous stuff from the real life, why shouldn't you be able to do it in real life?
That's right. It'll be sustainable.
But it's not a binary jump, either or. No, it's a gradual, step-by-step process.
Gradual, step-by-step process, yes. Yeah. All the while constantly focusing on the resilience that got produced from whatever happened, whether there was success or failure, it doesn't matter. And we learn from the failures to keep rebuilding, re-examining the resilience, all right? So in summary, when we're working with these resilient energies, we spark it up, we build it, we anchor it, and then we test it. We do not want to kill or collapse that energy too soon, okay? So like you want to spark that energy in a safe space, but you don't want to suddenly take it away. It's a gradual taking away of the protections. This is extremely important because I've seen this so much. If we hold something or someone as precious, we actually are holding them as fragile. That's anti-resilience. We're constantly endowing people with resilience. When we do that, they will respond accordingly, meaning when we endow people as resilient, they will exhibit resilient behavior. Resilience breeds resilience. Okay, if I'm not clean and I'm holding you fragile, I'm feeling fragile and fearful myself, you're not really gonna tap into that resilience so quickly. In fact, I'm kind of disallowing that. So no matter what's going on, I'm endowing you with resilience so that even, and I've talked about this in other webinars, even if you're fighting me, fighting yourself, I see that as resilient energy. And we train you on how to see it and capture it, right? So another concept, if something truly is resilient, then it is able to be provoked and it can withstand. That should say withstand resistance. It can withstand resistance. That's the antithesis to this psychological safety, because I feel psychological safety is a good thing, but it can go wrong if we're trying to, clear the room of any resistance, because then what we're really doing is we're sterilizing ourselves and saying we can't have trouble here. No, if we're truly resilient people, yes, we're mutually respectful, all of that, then we're able to be provoked, we're able to have some resistance to work with, and we actually need to provoke the boundaries of safety. We need some healthy provocation because that enables resilience to rebuild and reinforce itself. That's the true psychological safety, all right? So when you're starting to test, don't be discouraged if that good energy completely collapses at the first try. Refocus on what was the original access point or the original desire or the original spark, rebuild it, reconstruct it, re-anchor it, then test it again. Try it again, rinse and repeat, try it again, rinse and repeat. Each time with a little slight variation, meaning a little bit more trouble, but you're focusing on what is withstanding, what is remaining, what is being reconstructed. And that's what's creating the ownership in the client, right? A baby learns how to walk by falling. They get up, they walk, they fall, they get up. It's the process of getting up and moving their legs, risking the falling so they learn how to balance. That's how they learn how to walk. If we took away, oh no, the baby can't fall, well, they won't develop any muscle power. They've got to fall.
So it sounds, sorry.
And you've got to endow the baby as being resilient. They're bouncy. They'll bounce back. Yeah, go ahead, Benjamin.
Sorry for interrupting you, Troy.
No.
It sounded to me like there are two different states, and you learn. So there's this resilient state and the non-resilient state, and if you just know that there is that you have accessed it once or so, the resilient space, you don't know how to access it. So you're training getting in and out, getting in and out.
That's
so
right.
You're training your ability, your flexibility to switch into that different state.
Yep.
And you can only, how can you train that? By getting out and in again.
Just getting to know both states. Okay, this is how I am when I'm non-resilient. And then here I am very resilient. And then I can toggle back and forth. Now I have choices at will.
Just like the kid falling, getting up again.
Yep. Here's me falling, here's me getting up. Yeah.
It needs to train getting up again to be on the ground.
Yeah.
And to be there, it needs to fall down.
So you want, actually, after a while, you want to bring back the non-resilience so they get back into the resilience. Otherwise, the resilience, if it's precious, it's a false state. We need to get in and out and in and out. But what usually happens is the client is already coming to the session non-resilient. So we want to poke through and find the resilient spark, build that up, okay? Not focus on the fearful state. But once that resilient state is built up, we want them to return to the non-resilience and get to know how each distinctly feels. And then learn, how do I keep accessing the resilience when I want to? And they can further reconcile it by saying, you know, maybe there is a usefulness in my non-resilience, but I'm not stuck there because now I have free access to both. That's when they start bridging the two together and reconciling them. Yeah.
So it's not that the ability remains with the coach.
No, it remains with the client. In fact, you get the client so artful with themselves. It's like they're no longer a baby learning to walk, but the baby can now jump. And the baby could even take a dive and purposefully fall, right? So they can start dancing, okay?
Right. So the coach's intention is to create an autonomous being, being able to toggle between the two different states artfully, as you mentioned.
That's right. Then the person is fully creative, they're agile, they're autonomous, and there's no such thing as courage anymore. Because if there's courage, there's some level of fragility going on, like, oh, I have to push myself, look at me.
There's something to overcome. If there's nothing to overcome,
there's nothing to overcome.
Well, there is resilience.
That doesn't mean they won't feel fear, but they're not driven by the fear or overcome by the fear. They'll experience the fear and then they make choices. How do I handle it? That's it, right? And that's what fearlessness is. Fearlessness is not about the absence of fear. Fearlessness is like, feel the fear, do it anyway. But even that creates pressure. It's just, I feel the fear and I'm in relationship with it. And I'm using it to bring out my creativity. So whenever doing these tests of resilience or provocation, practice that in an environment of enjoyment, pleasure, humor, and irreverence. Don't put pressure on yourself or them, because that also reinforces the resilience of a person when we do things with pleasure, enjoyment, and humor. And the irreverence takes away the feeling of this has to be precious and so serious. And like we said before, if an energy is false or disconnected, just take it away and see what the reaction is. If they cling, fight, defend, collapse, then the energy was never secure to begin with. Then we can rebuild. If, when you try to take something away, the energy remains and it's unconditional without fight or defense, it is resilient and it is well anchored. All right. I think that's it. Any final words on testing resilience? And I'm sure over the year I'll do more on this, but we certainly work with it a lot during modules. And in previous webinars, you can look at how to build resilience, like webinar 9 from 2020 is a good one, which is called Core Vitality and Resilient Wellbeing. I think from the beginning of the year, Connection to Source and the Basics of Building Resilience, those are from 2020 and 2019. I think I have them all on the featured webinars playlist. So, any last words, Benjamin? I really thank you for sticking around. Okay, so I guess for those watching the recording, thank you. Feel free to contact me with your questions. You can email me info@essence-dynamics.com. Subscribe to the YouTube channel, watch past webinars. Visit the website, essence-dynamics.com. And in the meantime, treat yourself as a resilient being. Get to know what sparks your resilience, what triggers your fears, but don't dwell in them, but actually pay attention to what enables me to sustain myself, what enables me to live through this turbulence or this distressing moment, what's keeping me alive. That will spark resilience. Feed it, let that feed your well-being, anchor it for yourself somewhere in your body, know your mindset, know how you feel, know the sensation, and then test it. Reintroduce some of those initial doubts and fears, see what happens, and then just keep refocusing on your resilient state. And in all of it, take pleasure in the moment. So thank you everyone for listening. We're on again March 17th with the Coach's Dilemma. That's webinar number 4. In the meantime, keep radiant, keep creative, keep resilient, and most of all, enjoy.